Hello, my name's Ambrose. I'm a foreign correspondent, documentary maker, and investigative journalist who reports around Asia for Al Jazeera English. And last year, I was super honoured to win this, the International Journalist of the Year at the 2021 One World Media Awards. And this year, I'm incredibly honoured to have judged the category and better yet, moderating a discussion right now with three finalists. All three, we were incredibly impressed with their body of work. They're from different corners of the world, but are all trailblazers in their own right. So just to introduce them, we've got Fabiola Torres, based in Peru for, if I pronounce this incorrectly, please correct me, Fabiola, but Salud con Lupa, correct?
Yes, it's correct. In English, it would be like glasses under amplifier glasses.
Okay, cool.
Help with under amplifier glasses.
Excellent. And we have the OCCRP's lead reporter, Miranda Petrucic, you're based in Bosnia, Sarajevo, is that correct?
I am, and hello from Sarajevo, and thank you for having me.
Great. And last but not least, Channel 4's Africa correspondent, Jamal Osman, who appears to be on the road right now, reporting stories. Hello, Jamal.
Yes, hello. Yeah, I'm based in London, but I travel frequently to Africa. Yeah, hello.
Hello. Thank you all for having being part of this discussion. So to begin with, I'd love for each of you to give a short summary of the work you submitted into the One World Media Awards and the impact it had. So I'll start with Fabiola.
Well, thank you. I have to say that I started Salud con Lupa. The media was launched 6 months before the COVID appeared. And during the last 2 years, we covered the emergency, the pandemic, and we investigated what happened with the vaccines, the emergency in the country, how was the impact of the emergency. And the media was like a platform for many people who need information, what's useful, and also we alert a lot of information that not all the journalistic community know, because our advantage was that we were a small team that have a specialized information. And this is something that I decided to do and launch this platform, independent platform, after working as an investigative reporter in other medias. But I thought many years that investigative journalists were not paying attention a lot of time in public health, because it's not the same sex appeal like other topics like organized crime or corruption, but also in health, in public health, there is a lot of problems like corruption. You know, the pandemic showed us the importance of it.
Mm-hmm. No, it was a great piece, a great piece of multimedia journalism. Miranda, what about the body of work that you did investigating oligarchs in Central Asia and you know, some of the organized crime that goes on there?
Reporting in Central Asia has been my passion for a very long time. What I've seen happen is, you know, we're talking about a huge amounts of, you know, billions of dollars that are stolen from public budgets and put into the hands of, you know, ruling elite and oligarchs. And so for me, reporting about this has always been a fun and challenge. But several years ago, I realized that it shouldn't be only Western journalists or journalists from other parts of the world reporting about the country, and that we need to build reporters inside these countries to report about what's going on in their environments. So I've been basically mentoring and actually building Central Asian reporters for the past several years and reporting with them on a number of big investigations looking at some of the most powerful people. And one example was the effort we did to look into Uyghur family, which was running a smuggling ring in Central Asia, basically smuggling Chinese goods into Kyrgyzstan and Uzbekistan, and then laundering that money into the West with the help of a very powerful customs boss. And that investigation was amazing and really showed how with the good investigative reporting, you can change the face of the country. So when we publish those investigations and basically show how the customs boss enriched himself, how this criminal gang basically looted the country and moved the money off to the West, people went on streets, and there was a revolution, and government was overthrown. And this is just one example. So we've done many powerful stories, and I was happy to be able to work with these reporters and uncover billions in assets of the former Kazakh president, and also many other stories looking at the top people in the Central Asia.
Yeah, look, it was a great body of work, and it showed a lot of intrepidness and digging really deep into I don't know how you guys did those stories. It was incredible. Jamal, I mean, you yourself as well, you've been reporting from, really restive parts of Ethiopia, like the Tigray region. Can you give, your body of work was quite diverse, but can you give us a sense of, the work that you did last year in Ethiopia?
Yeah, good, thank you. Last year, I would say the best part of last year, I was busy covering Ethiopia because Ethiopia is going through a tough time. There is a war that has started in November 2020 between the government led by Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed and TPLF rebel groups, Tigray People's Liberation Front, who are in the north. So as soon as the war started, we had reports that human rights abuses were taking place in the Tigray region, where the government took control, as well as Eritrean forces who are from a neighboring country. So I went there with my colleagues, a cameraman and a producer, to investigate allegations of rape and massacres and other sort of abuses. And what we uncovered was quite horrific. We went to the main hospital, to this place called One Stop Center, where rape victims go and report. And we were there for literally 2 hours, and lots of women came in reporting what happened to them. And then we just followed the story there and went to a safe house where dozens of women kept, because it wasn't safe for them to go anywhere else. Also, massacres. And then in town, we met people who fled the conflict, who lost family members, who walked hundreds of kilometers to arrive the capital city, Mekelle. And that was in Mekelle, but also when the government left the northern region of Tigray and left the area, the TPLF rebel group, who were in control of Ethiopia for almost 30 years. So they are not a weak rebel group, they're a very powerful rebel group, well armed, sophisticated, had good connections everywhere. They attacked neighboring regions called Amhara and Afar region. So they also allegedly committed similar abuses, massacres, rape. So all these human rights abuses, some would call it war crimes, were abused by all sides. And that is what we have focused on, how the war is affecting the people, rather than talking about the politics and the big guys and what they are saying and their statements. So, and that's what we have done. And it wasn't easy to do, especially when we were going to Mekelle. The government was on paper saying journalists are allowed to go there, but on the other hand, they were stopping people at the airport, to other journalists who were traveling to go there. So what helped me was, I am from the region, from the East African region. I am Somali, so I can easily meddle. I don't stand out as a foreigner. So as my colleagues who travel with me, and that helped. So we went there to do the story and came back. And the story, especially we did in Mekelle, it was quite powerful and quite tough to do it for all of us. And I would say it had a massive impact, because up to then, there were reports, but nobody went there and interviewed the actual victims and talked to them. And I'm saying, other journalists. It was mostly newspapers and on the phone, but we managed to film them, though we hid their identities. And it was quite moving. And the government, a few days later, had to admit raid was taking place. Before that, the government was saying nothing is happening. Our soldiers are well behaved. Eritreans were in denial. So the government, for the first time, after our report came out with a lot of pressure from international community, said, yes, the raid is taking place and we will do an investigation. So that is the impact it had, I would say. And the war is still going on. It's still happening. And, they're pushing back and forth each other. And actually, I would say it's getting much, much worse. But we just focused on the people and how the war is impacting on their lives.
And Jamal, you've been doing this for quite a long time, reporting across Africa. What drives you? What drew you to do this kind of work?
I would say, in short, it's my background. I grew up in Somalia during the civil war. I left after sort of several years, but I experienced the worst years of Somalia civil war. So personally, I have experienced abuse, and killings and massacres, and I think that is what always pushes me in terms of my journalism. I feel the pain. I can relate to these people because I grew up in a civil war country, and I wanted to expose human rights abuses and wrongdoings with the hope of things changing for the better. So that is what drives me. I think is my background, me experiencing civil war and horrible things, and trying to use my journalism to hopefully make the world a better place.
And it certainly does. I mean, Fabiola, what about you? What drew you to journalism?
Well, as a journalist, I have the necessity to tell a story, to show a problem and try to expose it, to have the opportunity to the others have solutions. But also during this time, working in Salud con Lupa, I work that it's very important to do stories that people engage and connect, and useful stories for people. And in public health, I understand that is the topic that impact directly in people's life. The abuses of market, the abuses power of the state, all of it is connected in people's life. And in public health, we will see this directly, and we have the opportunity to show and explain it better. And I'm very curious. I am not a scientific, but during these years, I learned a lot. And now I have a new community of sources. And this is something that I am learning all the time. And this is something I love of journalists also.
I want that was a great answer. I wanted to also talk a bit about the commonalities of all three of you. I mean, you do very different work, but there are things that you have in common. And us judges, when we were looking at it, we thought, the last 2 years we've seen like Ukraine, Afghanistan, US politics dominate the international news agenda. Miranda, like, how hard is it to kind of cut through with stories from largely unreported corners of the global south, like Central Asia, Peru, Ethiopia? How hard is it to kind of cut through the kind of dominant stories that are in the news cycle?
It's very hard to make people care about countries they don't know anything about. And, some of the places where I work in, people have never heard of it. But what's really important, and what I try to do with every investigation I do, is basically to show that what happens in that part of the world ultimately affects, people in the West. And the thing of corruption and organized crime, it doesn't stop on one border. Even the Central Asian dirty money going to London, going to the US, going to Germany. This was the product of the global world. So what I try to do is try to connect with the West. And what I do a lot, and what I teach others to do, is follow the money, because I believe even in the most closed societies where you cannot get records, you can actually get them in the West. And then using the records in the West, you can make people in the West care, because it's their services, their people, which are being used to commit a corruption. So that's what I do. And when you and I think once people show how the scale of those stories, they start to care. because they see that the billions are looted. It's not just a small amount of money. It's incredible amount of money, the amount of money we can't even imagine. And, you know, they get angry because it's affect their lives. So, you know, if you steal money in Azerbaijan and then you go to London to buy, you know, high-end properties, that ultimately has effect on the, you know, regular people in London. And I think showing this kind of global perspective is really important to make people globally care about what's going on. And then another point is, we've all seen what happens with Russia and what happens when journalism dies and when you lose every free media in a country. And I think that's another reason why we need to care, and why people need to care, why we need to show them that, you know, stories from those parts of the world, caring, sending a message, this is not acceptable, is really important.
Yeah. And Jamal, what about you? I mean, Channel 4, you know, British politics does dominate, especially, you know, with what's going on with Boris Johnson, and, you know, like domestic stories do dominate. So as a foreign correspondent, how do you cut through the noise?
Yeah, I think what I always tell young journalists is being a journalist, it doesn't only mean you have to get the stories, but you have to also be a very good salesperson. That's how I see it. So convincing my bosses is not easy. I have to admit that, because they prioritize UK. It's the UK, you know, television. Although Channel 4 had, you know, a long history of strong foreign coverage, but you still have to fight, you know, for that few minutes that you want. And, you know, it takes a lot of determination and, you know, not giving up, I think, and pushing your editors and trying to explain to them how important these stories are. And, you know, as my colleague said, you know, sometimes, you know, telling them it affects people here and finding the links to here. So, which you can't always succeed, but, you know, other times you just have to fight for your stories. I always say my stories are my babies. I have to fight for them. I have to make sure my bosses, you know, commission it and they send me there and I do these stories, because I passionately feel these, you know, these people are as important as people here. You know, the people there might not have the resources and the expertise to highlight and expose, but we have it. So, yeah, but I just said I fight for it. That's how I usually approach it, knowing, you know, I'm not the top priority, or Africa is not, you know, on the list, on the top list, and you just fight for it. I think that's how I usually approach it.
Fabiola, like, and Miranda, I'm going to ask this to you as well. You're both affiliated with media organisations that are relatively new players in the landscape, and you focus your investigative reporting on a particular geographic region. When it comes to producing quality reporting, what are your goals? What are your priorities? Like, do you avoid the main news cycle and run your own race? Like, Fabiola, maybe you could go first.
Well, we know that we are a small team and a small independent media, and we try to work with a strategy, because we know that in this time, for example, in my country and in South America, we are living a time of crisis whole time, and most of the stories, the most important stories are happening now, and we pay attention the present, what's happening, but we have our own agenda. All the time we are trying to work in long form stories, investigations, and while a part of the group are working on this, and the other are paying attention in some stories. Sometimes we have stories from the week that have a big impact. For example, this weekend, a big company in my country that sells policies for cancer have many complaints because many patients don't have all the coverage that they offer. And we investigated, and we know how they build the company, the owners. They are not a company that have like many investigations from the authorities. And we know it, and we also offer our community information, how you can disaffiliate, or how can you do another thing to protect you. This is something that we know because we pay attention what's the public conversation. And Saluco Lupa is in the public conversation, but also is paying attention what's important to investigate. And of course, we can't cover as a big media all is happening in my country, but we especially pay attention public health topics, human rights, because last year and during the last 2 years, we have a lot of crimes and a lot of crises that are not until our investigations rolling, but we need to continue covering some things that the general media just report and forget, and we need to do a deep report and also have an agenda that others forget. No? One day report and the next they forget. But this is something that we do as a small team.
And Miranda, I mean, you guys have been doing a lot of your investigations in Central Asia, but you are expanding to other forgotten corners of the global South, like the South Pacific. What's the OCCRP's like priorities when it comes to producing impactful journalism?
We want to publish stories that are about the people who are untouchable, people who have absolute impunity and feel absolute impunity from everything they do, and who are very dangerous to report about, by local journalists. I mean, that's what we try to do. We try to, in every part of the world where we work, we try to do the stories about those who are most powerful, most corrupt, large scale organized crime, large scale corruption. And also what we do is we build on our team effort, team power, because of the fact that we have journalists and local partners in so many parts of the world. We basically try to work together in order to do stories that are not just local, but also cross-border and global stories. And in Central Asia, a lot of our work has been basically, for example, working in Turkmenistan, one of the closest countries in the world, and basically uncovering how the first family has been enriching themselves on the food imports. And in Turkmenistan, the food is controlled by the state. So you have rations, and you can, for example, get only 2 quarters of the chicken a month per family member. And we have, for example, discovered that the first family has been enriching themselves by, giving themselves the contract. So those are the stories. We try to look at underreported stories, the stories about very important people, and then use the power of collaboration and a global network to basically get information about these people worldwide.
Jamal, your work is a little bit different. You're based in the UK, but you cover the African continent pretty extensively. How do you ensure that you avoid some of the trappings of parachute journalism, which by definition is being remote from a place and going in and leaving to anyone kind of listening?
Yeah, I think it's a very important question, and I think what helps me is I am from the region. I was born and raised there. I speak the local languages. I always say I'm physically here, but my soul and my heart is there. I follow that region more than I follow UK politics. So I think coming from the region, knowing the culture, the background, the history, speaking the local languages, I think that helps, especially when you are a journalist and covering. So I think, yeah, as I said, that helps me because I am from the region. I might not be physically always there, but I follow what's happening and sort of know in and out and the history and the background and I frequently travel there. So spend 2-3 weeks, maybe 5 weeks at a time, half the year or maybe more. I spend there. So yeah, I think that helps me, but I understand some of the people, if you don't know anything about the region, then it's quite difficult. And I give an example to a story I did a few years ago about fake pirates, where a group of young men tricked Western journalists. They were pretending to be Somali pirates. And I always say, someone like me, as soon as they speak, I can tell whether they are Somali or not. But very, very simple thing. But for, a white Western journalist from here, for them, they're all Africans. They all look similar, and they wouldn't be able to tell the difference. So, there are little things like that. And I think, as I said, knowing the culture, the language, the different accents, and all of that, that helps you, cover fairly. But also it helps you, remain safe, because you know where it can get tricky and where, the dangerous guys are. And so I would say I am in a very good position where I work with the Western media with all the resources and the expertise, but also I'm an African. I'm local when I am there.
Mm-hmm. Fabiola, when looking at your body of work that you submitted for the One World Media Awards, it was a multimedia piece, with video, text. You felt as though you were really connected with the communities you were reporting on, and it, contrasts very much with, I guess, the way international news has been covered in the global South, dominated by Western media and foreign correspondents as the narrators of the events. The affected populations, they're largely passive backdrops to stories. Do you feel, the digital revolution is decolonizing foreign reporting? Are more locals, whether they're journalists or citizens, are they having the platforms to kind of be part of the story, influence in the work that you do?
In my country, and what I know in my experience, during the last 2 years, I know that more than 4 new outlets appear, digital outlets appear in Peru to cover some topics that were not in the radar of the big medias or the correspondents. But definitely, this kind of media have an impact in their communities, but not the same audience the other media have. They are important, of course, because most of the time they alert on big stories, because as Salud con Lupa, for example, a small media can publish a big story with a big impact. It's true, most of the more important stories were published in independent medias in my country. But on the other hand, it's also true that the logistic and the conditions, the secure conditions for many journalists that are not supported for as correspondents or other companies, media companies, is very complicated to work, and you can imagine to have a competition in this kind of community. I would like to think on this to create new communities of people that are expecting new kinds of experience to know the news, because the experience you have during your checking your phone or participating in a space, a Twitter space or a live in a media like this, you are living the news in your country in a different way, like in a report of a correspondent. It's different. And small media during this time in my country were doing a hard work, even the limits of freedom of expression, because we have many problems during the pandemic and now during this government.
Mm-hmm. Just building on what Fabiola said, Miranda, what about the role of affected populations in helping news organisations uncover injustices? I ask this question because, you know, atrocities in Ukraine, in Ethiopia, were documented by soldiers or citizens with mobile phones, whereas, you know, humanitarian disasters closer to where you are based, like Ukraine, Afghanistan, we still see Western news agencies being a dominant player in telling the story. You know, does boots on the ground matter when an audience can publish their plight to the world, you know, using a phone?
I think the audience, I think having boots on the ground really matters because, you know, you need a trusted source. And I think part of the problem with lack of trust in media is that there have been so much disinformation that is spread exactly through different social media app and, you know, your phones. And that's where having a quality journalism really matters and really makes a difference. You know, why do you need local people is because they know the best what are the stories that matter to the, you know, the country. And they're the best, the ones who are best to tell these stories. Reporting wise, you know, nobody can replace going on the ground and basically seeing yourself with your own eyes or talking with the people and getting this human element that is very often missing from international coverage, because again, you know, it's much more difficult to talk to people, especially in places where you have different local languages that very few people speak. You know, when I think about, you know, Kyrgyzstan and the Kyrgyz language, this is, you know, a part of large part of population that often does not have their voice heard. And you really need to have a local speaking journalist who can go and actually interview them and, you know, get their story. I also want to say about another thing, you know, when you have a media who now are forced to work in exile, like many of the media in, you know, let's say Russia and, you know, Russian media and many of the Ukrainian media and also Afghan media and, you know, even some of the Central Asian media, let's say Turkmenistan, you know, what I've seen is that having a contact with people locally is really important. And you can actually have this kind of contact through Telegram and other communications challenge. And for example, our partner in Turkmenistan has been actually really able to utilize this to actually get sources. And what he often does is, you know, he'll send out a message to his channel saying, I need an expert in telecom. I have a story I'm looking into. It's really important, you know, please reach out. And he's been able to get, you know, information from the closest country on earth, but basically people reaching out with information after they're asked to reach out in a secure way. So it's important. It's important both to keep in touch with the local population. You know, I think sometimes as a journalist, you know, we get carried away with the documents, especially if you have a leak and you kind of forget about actual human contact. So it's really important to make people care. You know, we asked about narrative. People don't care about, you know, a bunch of companies and a bunch of large amounts of money, but they do care when they see how it affects the lives of people. And then, you know, we also need this contact with the people in order to get information and get sourcing, especially from places that are extremely difficult to report from.
Mm-hmm. And I mean, that's what we saw in your work and, you know, Jamal's work as well. I mean, both Ethiopia and Central Asia are incredibly dangerous, you know, journalists being killed, being jailed, being assaulted. They're oppressive environments. I wanted to ask you and Jamal, maybe Jamal first, how do you stay safe and how do you protect your sources in very restive areas like Tigray?
Yeah, I think it's a very difficult, you know, to balance. And what helps me again is living in London myself. My sort of for my own safety, I can, you know, film material and come back and edit and release and then assess the situation. So that helps. But in terms of the local people that your sources, the people you interview, I think you just have to, you know, make a judgment whether you make them anonymous or not. Sometimes people want to talk because, you know, they're hurt, they are angry, they feel they have nothing to lose. But for you as a journalist, I think you have to sort of judge and think about their safety, because as I said, at the end of the day, I'll come back to London. I know I'll be fairly safe. So I just make that judgment whether I make them anonymous or not. And you can always tell stories, whether you make people anonymous or not. And the main thing is telling their plight or their suffering and, you know, telling the story. And there are ways you can tell, I think, without, you know, risking their lives or revealing their identities. But there are other stories that, and it varies from one country to another, I think, where people can speak out. Like in Kenya, people speak out and, they have a bit more freedom and, they wouldn't be killed. But in places like Ethiopia, even Somalia or even Eritrea is much worse. If you interview critical voices, they won't be alive by the time after the story is released. So I think it's the journalist's responsibility. That's how I see it's my responsibility to make sure that because of the story, no one gets harmed or hurt.
Mm-hmm. And Miranda, some of the things that Jamal said, I'm sure they kind of resonate with you. The people not surviving if they speak out against oligarchs or the government. How does the OCCRP ensure, the protection of you and other journalists and the sources?
Would you believe if I told you that I went through a surveillance and counter-surveillance training? That's one way, being able to basically recognize if you're being surveilled. But going back to the question, I've been working for over a decade in really dangerous places, and I've dealt with being followed, dealt with being threatened to be killed, and a lot of situations like that. So I've seen this from the perspective of journalists, and I've seen how important it is to have organization which actually cares about security, an editor who actually knows your steps and can tell you, well, you need to get out of this country right away. But also now from the perspective of an editor and somebody who leads a team of reporters, for us, basically every step we take in Central Asia, we carefully plan it. We plan who we reach, how we reach, who goes. And if you look at some of the stories that we've done in Central Asia, there are no names, because the reality of journalism, no matter how much of our ego we want to display to the world, it's much more important to keep reporters safe. And and I want to in addition is of personal safety and basically worrying about planning a meeting carefully, planning approach to people. Sometimes again, we use a powerful network, and I'll often talk to people that local reporters are too afraid to talk to, or I'll send a request in my name to help a reporter. Somebody else will send a request. But another really important point is solidarity among reporters. Earlier this year, one of the reporters in Kyrgyzstan, he's a well-known name, Bolotamirov. His office was raided. He was planted drugs by the authorities. He was arrested, and now he's facing 18 years in prison on several charges. But what was really important is when his case happened, local journalists from many news organizations went to the location, and they were following what the authorities have been doing. And then, we gathered a team of reporters who actually looked into his case, and they were able to, we were able to tell a story how, Secret Service basically for months monitored, harassed, surveilled, recorded, planted devices even in his home, in his office. One of the agents seduced one of his employees, filmed her in the intimate situation, and released all of that. So we were able to basically look into who was behind it and basically prove it was a Secret Service. And I think this is really important when we speak about media and protection of media. We need to have this solidarity. People in the dangerous parts of the world, if they're left to their own, if there's nobody to speak and support them, basically, they're in much more dangerous position. And I think, this is also one of the importance of the awards, like, One World Media Award, where you give a prominence to local journalists who are really, fighting and doing a very dangerous work. And, by raising their profiles, it sends a powerful message that there's somebody who cares about their safety. There's somebody who cares about what happens to them, and the authorities are less inclined to act. So that's all part of the, protection. And, part of what we try to do is also raise the profile of the local journalists and basically, get their voices out into the world, so they would be safer and able to do their work.
And this raid that you mentioned, for people watching this video, it was one of the stories you submitted for the One World Media Awards. And I have to say, it kind of, at times with the honey traps and stuff, it kind of read like a spy novel or a spy movie, the way it was written and everything unfolded. It was definitely, if you're watching this, you have to read that piece. Fabiola, if I'm not mistaken, and you correct me if I'm wrong, everyone's kind of moved on from the pandemic, but Peru actually has the highest COVID-19 death rate in the world, if I've read online. So, you know, with your stories, you know, how hard is it to uncover the truth and hold government officials accountable for incompetence, especially when, you know, a lot of the subjects, the people that feature in your stories are kind of Indigenous communities, people who are, you know, the most disenfranchised members of society?
Yeah, about these numbers, unfortunately, is true. Indigenous people, especially in the Amazon, the Peruvian Amazon, are in risk, and they were in risk before COVID, during COVID, and are in risk right now. The problem is that with the emergency, they were like isolated because all the country were in quarantine, and after that, the epidemiologists and the information that the commission need to track to follow the pandemic didn't consider the information of the indigenous people. And when we need to investigate what happened in this part of the country, the answer was there is no information, just 48 people dead in 1 year. And it was definitely false. The only thing that we know in this moment, we knew in this moment that we have to do a project, an investigation to know what happened. And we knew what happened, interviewing the leaders in each community in 5 regions of the Peruvian Amazon. We understand why they are not reported in the official numbers, and why until now there is no official report that explains what happened after 2 years in the 5 Peruvian regions, Amazon, during the pandemic. This is something that happened because of the political crisis, and this is something that it doesn't mind for many people in my country. It's far from the capital, but also because we knew and we understand that the statistics and how in the Minister of Health and how the Commission developed the information didn't consider this this value, or how can we say the cell of indigenous people. Why? As they don't consider other characteristics of the population. And that's why Salud con Lupa developed the Other Peru, to try to track the information, to connect information from communities, from data that we develop, we built, and also interviewing authorities. And it's not all the reality, of course. We knew that in Loreto, for example, Reuters, an agency, the correspondent, have a lot of photos, pics of a cemetery with grave without name. A lot of, many families didn't have the functions, name of their parents or sons, and we knew that happened something there, and we tried to follow this story, and it's part of the Other Peru story also.
And I guess it's not just the government that often dismisses reporting that you unearth. Like, all 3 of you do journalism that is very original, and you often you know, expose injustices that the government don't want people to know about. But also there's this factor where the audience might go, I don't believe this. This is fake news. I think this reporter has an agenda. Jamal or Miranda, how much extra work do you guys have to do as journalists to kind of say to the audience, look, this is true, I've got this evidence? Do you feel you have to work harder to kind of show how you came to, you know, produce this investigation, or, you know, show the layers of the work to kind of go, look, this is general, real, real facts. Like, Jamal, what do you think?
Yeah, I think the challenge is even now greater because of social media. In the case of Ethiopia, for example, I remember when I did allege the Ethiopian government and Eritrean abuses against civilians in Tigray, the pro-government camp went after me on social media, criticizing, trying to discredit my story. A few months later, when I did, the story where the TPLF rebel groups were committing abuse against other communities, again, the people who were criticizing me were all of a sudden praising me, and the people who were praising me before were criticized. So I think it's not only the government. I think it's also social media and different communities all trying to fight for what they believe in. And I think what I always do is, for me as a journalist, try and to be, very fair, try and to do my, fact checking, try to make sure that I can stand up, all the things that I'm putting out, and just double checking and not trusting anybody. Even in war zones, people would lie to you. There are always, brokers, people who have interests who would, find you whatever, case studies that you want. So it's good to be very cynical about everything and not trusting anybody, and just double checking and, looking for the telltales that people might be lying to you. And I think once you are confident enough, this is the truth story and these people are telling the truth and this is the real story, then you put it out and you just have to deal with, the criticism, because people will always criticize you. I remember the first lesson in my journalism years ago at Kingston University. I was told a story is something that someone doesn't want you to tell. I always remind myself, it doesn't matter how hard I try, there will always be people who will criticize my work, and that's part of the job. That is how I see it. But when it comes to safety and personal, safety and risk, then there are other procedures that you have to go through. But I think as long as you're confident and you're comfortable what you're putting out and you have done your, fact checking, I usually, don't worry about, what people say.
Well, Miranda, what about you? Like, what do you kind of show documents that you've obtained as links? Like, how do you kind of prove that to the audience that all this hard work that you've been doing with your investigative stories, the story is real?
It's actually a good question. The interest of the audience is actually very often not to know the complexity of the reporting. I sometimes look at some of the stories that I've done and think about weeks of work to figure out the complex offshore structure, how somebody moved money abroad or how somebody won a contract, and then I think of the story we put out, and it's 3 sentences. And I think, the moment it becomes complicated, as a storyteller, the readers leave. So what OCCRP has been doing and what I'm now trying to implement with my work is basically this concept of the iceberg, which is, somebody just needs a tweet or key points. And then some other people are more interested in the narrative, will read a powerful narrative, but, don't want to get all the documents. And then for those people who want to know how we found out something, then we have these explainers of how we did it. And I'm actually even now experimenting with our team to basically show the layers of corporate ownership and basically how exactly, each company is owned by who and so on, and actually link all the document with the tool we've been designing, which is called Aleph, which is kind of like a document database repository with millions of records, and make these available. So previously we've been always linking documents that are most important, embedding them in the story. And now we're trying to, engage the audience in different ways. And one of the ways, and what's really important to notice is that we do have a very extensive fact-checking process. And I think, having such a formal and excruciating, a very painful process is really good for the stories, because ultimately they are bulletproof. And I think, for the local audience, if you make a mistake on some of, and the most typical mistakes that reporters make are very kind of like this, the name of the person, their title, maybe their age, some things that are easily checkable by people. And when public sees that those are wrong, they're thinking, oh, you're a sloppy journalist. So I'm very happy that we have such a process which basically prevents this kind of mistakes. And of course, any mistake that would result from misinterpretation of the data and so on. And also we have a very extensive legal process. And part of it is because of the slaps and, the profile of people we report about, they can easily sue you in London and some other places. And then, you have to use all your time and energy defending a story that was, and a lawsuit that was just designed to basically harass you.
Mm-hmm. Apart from navigating this challenge of fake news and misinformation, another question just to kind of wrap up is like, how do you, and I'll ask this to you, Fabiola, because you use a mix of video, text, photos to kind of report, like through your multimedia piece, The Other Peru. How do you feel, what's the best way to reach a Peruvian or a Latin American audience? Is it through investigative podcasts, slides, art installations? How do you think, an audience is reached, because there's just so much information out there in the landscape. So what are the best forms of storytelling that reach those audiences?
Well, nowadays there is no formula, but we have a website. After we publish in our website, we try to create many pieces for our social networks and also videos to explain. For example, we have a section that is named Comprueba. We try to explain to people how the science work, because during the pandemic, there was a lot of uncertain information and misinformation and disinformation and fake news everywhere. But this section was very appreciated for our audience. And we noticed that there were the principal news, the most read news in our website. And now our reporter, scientific reporter, publish in our website, and after that, record a reel that is for video in TikTok and Instagram, but just 1 minute, explaining the most important topic. And also our journalists try to concentrate in their reporting, but after that, we have an editorial meeting and we say, well, it's important to have a public conversation about this topic. What about a space, a Twitter space? This audience is important to open the conversation to this topic. Okay, let's go there, and we publish, and after that we do another activities, because we understood that our community that is not like the millions of people, but it's a very important community that are people that take decisions, scientific people, a scientific community that follow us, and also many people that trust in Salud con Lupa, because we have a prestigious in our specialized topic, follow us and trust in what we publish. We try to offer them many opportunities to participate in our news. And we are trying to do this because we notice that when they follow us, they try to like more than just read. They want to send us information. They want to participate with their opinion. And this is opportunity to engage people. And we are trying to develop the media in this way. This is our 3rd year. In July, we will have an anniversary, our 3rd anniversary. And it's important now for us that we have a stronger community than 2 years ago, and that all was very uncertain in the world.
As we near the end of this session, I just wanted to ask all three of you, and I'll go Jamal, Miranda, and Fabiola. What's the one piece of advice you have for, young journalists who are looking to get into international reporting in global South contexts?
I would say
Jamal?
I would say being really persistent and determined, that if you genuinely believe in the stories that you're covering, I think you just have to push and really try your best and never give up, because it's not easy to cover the global South, especially for Western media, and you have to be mentally very strong and just keep pushing it, and eventually you might not get every story that you want to get on air or online, but you will probably get most of it. So I think persistence is one of the key things I would tell young journalists.
Miranda?
I would say definitely, as Jamal said, believe in yourself. Because if we embrace the obstacles, then the reality is we will not accomplish what we want. But if we take the attitude where you can do it and you do your best, very often what will happen is a miracle, and you will get that one document that you thought would be impossible. We are our own biggest enemies. And when I was very young and working on a story, it took me 3 years of asking the same question to the people I was talking to, like, do you have this document? And 3 years later, after all these years of asking the same question, one person had it, and it turned into a huge investigation. So really believe it, and miracles will happen.
Persistence. Fabiola?
Yes, I agree with Jamal and Miranda, but also I will consider that if you are a journalist and you want to follow this experience, join a network, specialize in one topic, because when you are a journalist and you report and you have a lot of knowledge in one topic, you have a lot of value in your knowledge, and it's an advantage in your community. Work in collaboration. Of course, I will say, please consider specialize in public health. This is something that needs more investigative reporters.
Mm-hmm. And this is to anyone, feel free to kind of give your thoughts, but what qualities or skill sets do you think will become increasingly important for journalists who want to, report in the global South, keep unreported issues in largely ignored nations in the public eye? Like, what attributes do you need in the 21st century in this age of misinformation? Anyone?
I'll start by saying,
Miranda, you go first, sorry.
I was going to say, develop a collaborative nature. It's not a set of skills, but, one reality is we cannot know everything we need for the job, but we need to know what is out there and who can do it. And, my favorite example is, when you have people like a Bellingcat, who knows how to locate a building based on the shadow, that the person leaves. That's incredible skill to have. And we need to know that these people exist and can do it. So be collaborative, but at the same time, learn as many resources you possibly can learn, where you can get information, and don't stop at borders, in a way that, everything that is available to you locally is available internationally. And you just need to basically follow these traces and basically talk to people, and get them to share their skills, get them to share their know-how, so you can work on these big stories.
And Jamal, sorry, you were going to dive in there as well?
Yeah, I would say, I remember 14 years ago when I started, people were either TV journalists, radio journalists, newspaper journalists. These days, you have to be multi-skilled, I think. You have to be able to do everything. And and you have to be really flexible and approach it that way, I think. So if I would give one advice is don't think you can just be TV or radio or online, whatever. You have to do everything, even doing your research and presenting it. And while before people had different roles, even within different areas. And I think, yeah, being multi-skilled and being flexible, and I think that's a good advantage.
Mm-hmm. And my second last question is, and it's a bit of a shameless plug for all three of you. Like, do you guys, is there any work you guys working on at the moment that you want to draw the audience's attention to? Or is there any, do you want the viewers watching this, is there any way they can support your work further, through funding, the OCCRP? Do you take private donations? Anything you want to plug? Now's your time. I'll go Jamal, Miranda, and Fabiola. Jamal?
Yeah, I'll just probably talk about the story. I'm currently editing a story about a group called Al-Shabaab, who are militant Islamists in East Africa who are linked to Al-Qaeda. So I got back from Somalia and I spent a week with them, filming how they control large territories, in Somalia. So that's the story I'm currently working on. But in terms of Channel 4, I mean, it's public broadcaster, so I wouldn't advise anybody to give them anything. yeah. But that's the story I'm working on, which hopefully will come out this week.
Yeah. Miranda?
It would be too dangerous for me to reveal what we're working on.
Yeah.
But
Secret
we have
squirrel.
Secret squirrel. We have many stories in the pipeline.
Can I rephrase it for you? I've got actually, I can do this quite well. You guys are setting up an office in Sydney, looking at like work in the South Pacific. Maybe generate a bit of interest in that. What are you guys hoping to do with this South Pacific Bureau?
We basically want to work with the islands around South Pacific. We basically want to develop journalists there. So anybody who is super interested, super eager, wants to learn, wants to collaborate, please do get in touch. We want the best stories. We want underreported stories. We want stories that can make people care. So please come to us and tell us what we should be covering.
Yeah.
And what we hope is basically, we will integrate these islands more to the global community that we have, and basically do stories that are, both stories, from the West, how they impact this part of the world, and then how this part of the world impacts the West.
And Fabiola, I read that you've won the DART Foundation Institute Award on early childhood reporting. You're planning on doing some stories in that area?
Yeah, as you know, because of the impact of the pandemic, we have a generation of orphans, and we have a lot of topics of mental health. I pitched a story to the DART Center for Journalism Trauma. Well, one of the stories was accepted, and we are planning to do a special that include this topic, but also another story, because I will work in a collective in collaboration with my team. But I will also like this moment to invite the international audience to explore Salud con Lupa. If you don't know, I hope this year to open an English section, because we have some special investigations translated in English. For example, our scientifically proven app that is an investigation about all the COVID therapies and the evolution of the evidence that was coverage during 2 years with a group of scientists and Salud con Lupa. But we also created new sections like mental health, gender, and environmental topics in our media, because we try to cover public health as not just as illness. Not like people will think that just when you cover health, you just refer to one thing. And for example, all these years we just cover COVID-19, and many people don't want to read anymore COVID-19, but not. In our media, you will discover that public health it's connected with all your life. And of course, we investigate the market and the power, and you will discover how we do it, and maybe you have time to do it. Follow us in Salud con Lupa, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and now TikTok.
TikTok as well. You're going into capturing the youth. Very finally, guys, I mean, we'll be finding out very soon the winners of the One World Media Awards. How important is it for, you know, journalists, independent media outlets to be recognised with an accolade of this nature? How does it help? Jamal?
Yeah, I think it helps in many ways. I think I won, can't remember, a few years ago, Journalist of the Year, and it helped me massively. I can speak from, you know, experience, and, you know, whether it's that recognition you get within the media, you know, within the media industry, or whether it's the, you know, the protection it gives you, and more importantly, I think it encourages you to do more work. It gives you an energy to, you know, to continue your work and to highlight human rights abuses, and, you know, and to be a good journalist. So that's what I usually take from, I think.
Miranda?
It's definitely encouragement. It's definitely a safety net, because the higher profile of the local journalist is, the safer they are, and they're able, you know, the safer they are to continue the work that they've been doing. I think, you know, in my case, being a finalist, it's really recognition of the work of Central Asian journalists who, you know, we've been able to develop from, you know, from zero to really do some of the, you know, most important stories in the region. And you know, what these kind of awards do is they, and especially One World Media Award, it basically draws attention to the stories we have done. And many of these stories, you know, are still important and they still matter to people. And, you know, what I hope with you know, this kind of like a profile that this being a finalist is giving me, is that people will go back and read our work and basically, you know, take some more action than they have done before.
Yep, and Fabiola, finally with you, like, how important is it for an independent outlet that's 3 years old to be recognised with an award of this nature?
Well, to be nominated to the One World Media Award is very important, because it means that it's recognized that health journalism is very important, not just because of COVID-19 appeared, just because always was very important. Unfortunately, we knew this during an emergency like this. Now, I like that the media is recognized, that the work of my team is recognized also, because we motivate more journalists that are looking for a specialization, or they want to investigate something. They consider that public health is an important topic that needs more people participate in the community, and also consider that we need to hack the way we do journalism in public health, because during the pandemic we also knew that there is bad science and also good science, and in this part of the knowledge we'd also do investigation, and that's why I say we need investigative reporters in this part of the world, no? Because there is not a lot of in my country and in South America, especially in South America. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, and thank you as one of the judges on this panel looking at this. It was a great pleasure to read all of your work, and it was a very difficult decision. And I thank you very, very much for your time. You know, all three of you talking about the stories and the challenges of reporting in the Global South. And I wish you the best of luck next week. So thank you very much for your time.